Hey guys, it's Nimzy from Nimzy Unmeasured, and today we're going to be making Bosnian Burek. Burek is a meat pie, and it's made with very simple ingredients. The only thing you gotta get down is the technique. So the ingredients, you need white flour, some oil, or you can use melted butter if you want, pepper, ground beef, vegeta, an onion, some warm water, and some soda water and salt. If you don't have soda water, you can just use regular water with a little teaspoon of baking soda. So first thing we're going to make is the phyllo dough. The phyllo dough has to be homemade. A lot of recipes will tell you that you can use the packaged phyllo dough, but that's not really good. So you gotta make it from scratch. And burek is not a meal that you make in a rush. All right, so the first thing we need is flour. There are no exact measurements for flour because it really is gonna depend on how much you wanna make. And the humidity in the air will determine, how much water that you need. So I have about a pound of ground beef. So I'm gonna add a little bit more flour. Just if I'm eyeballing this, I would say this is about 2 to 2.5 cups of flour. So the next thing we're gonna do is add some salt, some sea salt. That's about 1.5 teaspoons. And then we have some warm water. The water is warm to the touch. It's not hot at all. And some people in this stage add a little bit of oil to the dough, but that's not really traditional. Traditionally, it's just water, salt, and flour, and that's it. So we're gonna add the water to the dough. You're not close enough. Don't put too much water in one shot. And as you're going, kind of get a feel for the dough. It should not be sticky when you're done. Okay, I need to add a little bit more flour because you can see it's sticking to my hands. Okay, so now the dough is coming together. It's not sticking to my hands anymore. And now we're gonna knead this and kind of build the gluten up so that it becomes very stretchy when we're ready to use it. And you wanna take your time and really knead the dough well. And if it starts getting sticky again, just add a little bit of flour, not too much at this stage. Just a little bit, and keep kneading. Knead it for a while, honestly, like 5 minutes wouldn't be too long. So now I'm just forming the dough in a ball. I'm gonna flour it a little bit so it doesn't stick to anything. And I'm gonna cover it with a dishcloth and let it rest. Now while your dough is resting, you're gonna prepare your meat. And to do that, you wanna have a small to medium-sized onion. And you're going to finely chop it and add it to the meat. Just add this to the meat. Now you're gonna add your vegeta. I have about 1.5 teaspoons to 2 teaspoons. We're gonna add fresh cracked pepper and some salt. Remember, the ingredients are very simple, so don't be afraid to put a good amount of salt and pepper. Now you're just gonna mix the dough. Don't overwork the meat. You don't want it to be tough. So just nicely mix the ingredients together, but don't like squeeze the meat and overwork it. Okay, just gonna cover the meat and let it rest. Now while that's resting, you wanna prep your table for the dough. So you need a large tablecloth. Don't use your good one, just use a large tablecloth that, you don't mind if it gets messed up. When you wash this tablecloth, don't use fabric softener. Just use a little bit of soap and wash it without fabric softener. If you use fabric softener, your dough will pick up the taste of the fabric softener, and that's not what we want. And we're gonna flour the tablecloth. This stage is really important because a lot of people that try to make burek, they don't know that you need a tablecloth to roll out the dough. And their dough tends to stick to the table and they don't have a neat looking burek. This is one of, this is like a necessary step. You need a tablecloth and you need to flour your tablecloth well. That prevents it from sticking. It creates like a layer of air between the dough and the surface of the tablecloth. So just flour it really well. Now we're gonna start with our dough. Okay, so I placed my dough, I flattened it a little bit, and I'm gonna flour it on both sides. And now I'm gonna use a rolling pin. Traditionally, this long rolling pin is used, but I've always just used my baker's rolling pin and found it sufficient. So it's really up to you, it's a personal choice. So just start rolling out your dough. Don't let it get too long in either direction. And go slowly so that you don't break the dough. So you're gonna keep rolling out your dough until it's about an 1/8 inch thick. Don't go too fast, because if you go too fast, you'll get wrinkles in your dough. You can see how thin it is. And make sure you get the edges, because the edges tend to be thicker than in the middle. Now I'm gonna add some melted butter, or you can use melted ghee to the dough. I'm just gonna brush it lightly. I'm really using the butter for flavor. You don't have to use it, you can just use oil if you want. And now I'm going to add some sunflower oil to the dough. Now to spread out the oil, you can just take your dough and fold it in half. This way. And that helps spread out the oil so much faster. Begin stretching the dough. Now, in order to stretch the dough, put your hands underneath the dough and pull towards you. And you kind of have to move around the table, because if you stay in one area, only one area of the dough will be stretched. So now you want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and take out your meat. So what we're gonna do is just spread the meat around the edge of the dough. So I finished spreading the meat all around the edges of the dough. And what I like to do is to use a pizza cutter, or you can use a sharp knife to cut off these edges. Don't throw out these pieces of dough because they're still good. Now that all of my edges are cut off, we're gonna start rolling. You can see that the dough has dried out, so it has like a paper-like consistency now. So you can use your tablecloth to roll the dough. And you don't want to roll on one side and keep rolling on one side. You want to make sure you're going around the entire circumference of the dough. Otherwise, you're going to not have an even burek. Now at this stage, the dough can be rolled. And while you're rolling, you want to pull the dough and make it thinner. So now while you're rolling and pulling, at some point the dough is going to break. If it doesn't start breaking on its own, you can cut it with a sharp knife. A pan to put my burek in, and I just use the extra butter to lightly oil my pan. So right here is the weak point. So I'm going to pinch it and break it off and close the edge so that the meat and all the juices don't spill out in the oven. So now I take my pan and I start in the center, and I'm going to roll it into a spiral. I like to make sure that the seam side is down whenever possible. So this is what we have. And now with the rest of the dough and leftover meat, we're going to repeat the same process. Okay, so now this is what's left of our dough and meat. We're just going to make a cut down the middle so we can finish rolling it. So I see a weak spot here, so this is where I'm going to pinch off the dough. And we're going to begin putting this in the pan again. Okay. Now we're ready to put our burek in the oven. So I'm going to let it cook like this for about 15 minutes. Now that 15 minutes has passed, we're going to take out the burek. And it's not finished cooking, but this is now the stage where you're going to put your baking soda water or your soda water, whichever one you prefer, and just pour it over the burek. What the baking soda water or the soda water is going to help do is it's going to help the dough brown. Okay, so now we're going to put this back in the oven. So now it's been about 30 minutes. I'm going to turn off my oven and check on the burek. All right, so it is ready.